The rain pounded against my umbrella like tiny bullets, each drop a reminder of how miserable this day had become. My shoes, cheap leather flats I'd bought on clearance, were soaked through, squishing with every step I took down the darkening street. October in Boston was unforgiving, especially when your shift at the hospital cafeteria ran late and your bus had already left without you. I pulled my thin jacket tighter around my body, shivering as the wind cut through the fabric. The streetlights flickered on one by one, casting long shadows across the wet pavement. 6 blocks to my apartment. 6 long, cold blocks before I could peel off these damp clothes and sink into a hot bath, if the building's ancient water heater decided to cooperate tonight. That's when I heard it. A small, hiccuping sob coming from the narrow alley between the pharmacy and the closed-down bakery. I almost walked past. In this neighborhood, strange sounds usually meant trouble, and trouble was something I had enough of already. But then, I heard it again. Unmistakably the cry of a child. I stopped, my heart suddenly pounding harder than the rain. "Hello?" I called, taking a cautious step toward the alley's entrance. "Is someone there?" No response, just another stifled sob. I hesitated, gripping my pepper spray in my coat pocket. After taking a deep breath, I angled my umbrella forward and stepped into the alley. Huddled against the brick wall, partially sheltered by a stack of empty produce crates, was a little boy. He couldn't have been more than 5 or 6, with dark hair plastered to his forehead from the rain. He wore expensive-looking clothes, a navy blue coat with brass buttons and little leather shoes that probably cost more than my monthly rent. His eyes, wide with fear and wet with tears, locked onto mine. "Hey there," I said softly, crouching down a few feet away from him. "Are you lost?" He nodded, his bottom lip trembling. "My name's Ellie. What's yours?" "Marco," he whispered, wiping his nose with the back of his sleeve. "I can't find my papa." I stepped closer, holding my umbrella over him. "How about we get you somewhere dry, and then we'll find your papa, okay?" He looked at me warily, and I remembered all the stranger danger warnings children received these days. Smart kid. "Look," I said, showing him my hospital ID card that hung from my neck. "I work at St. Catherine's Hospital. I help people. I promise I just want to get you out of this rain and help you find your family." After a long moment, he nodded and stood up, revealing a small backpack shaped like a dinosaur strapped to his shoulders. He couldn't stop shivering. "Here," I said, taking off my scarf and wrapping it around his neck. It was damp, but better than nothing. "The coffee shop across the street is still open. Let's go there and call someone who can help us." I held out my hand, and after a slight hesitation, his small, cold fingers wrapped around mine. We hurried across the street to Maggie's Coffee, a local place I sometimes splurged at on payday. The warm air inside was a blessed relief, carrying the rich scent of coffee and cinnamon. "Ellie," Maggie called from behind the counter. "Caught in the downpour, huh?" Her eyes drifted to Marco, her expression shifting to concern. "And who's this little gentleman?" "This is Marco. He got separated from his father, and we need to get him home." I guided Marco to a booth near the window. "Could we get 2 hot chocolates, please, and maybe a towel?" "Coming right up," Maggie said, already reaching for the phone. "Want me to call the police?" I glanced at Marco, who was now staring out the window, searching the rainy street with anxious eyes. "Not yet," I said. "Let's see if we can reach his family first." I slid into the booth across from Marco. "Do you know your papa's phone number?" He shook his head, looking down at his hands. "Uncle Nico has my papa's number. He was supposed to pick me up from school, but I couldn't find him. I tried to walk home." "It's okay," I reassured him, though my stomach knotted with worry. "Do you know Uncle Nico's number?" Again, he shook his head. "But it's in my emergency card." He pulled his backpack off, unzipped it, and produced a laminated card with contact information. "Brilliant," I said, taking the card. "You're very responsible, Marco." The card listed Nicholas Russo as the emergency contact with a phone number. At the top was Marco's full name, Marco Salvatore Russo. Below that were the words medical conditions, none, and parent, guardian, Dante Russo. Something about the name tickled at the back of my mind, but I couldn't place it. I pulled out my cell phone and dialed the number listed for Nicholas Russo. The phone rang only once before a gruff voice answered. "Yes?" Hello. Is this Nicholas Russo? I asked. Who's asking? The voice was tense, suspicious. My name is Ellie Morgan. I'm calling because I found Marco. You what? The voice cut me off, suddenly sharp as a blade. Where are you? Put him on the phone. Now. I blinked at the hostility, but handed the phone to Marco. It's your Uncle Nico. Marco took the phone, his small face crumpling. Uncle Nico. I got lost. Yes. No, I'm okay. A lady found me. We're at a coffee shop. He looked around, confused about the location. We're at Maggie's Coffee on Hartford Street, I supplied. Marco repeated the information, then listened for a moment before handing the phone back to me. Hello, I said. Stay exactly where you are, Nicholas Russo commanded. Don't move. Don't call anyone else. We'll be there in 10 minutes. Wait, I started to say, but the line had already gone dead. Maggie arrived with our hot chocolates and a clean dish towel. Everything okay? I think so, I said, helping Marco dry his hair with the towel. His uncle is coming to get him. I watched as Marco wrapped his small hands around the mug of hot chocolate, blowing on it carefully before taking a sip. A smudge of whipped cream landed on his nose, and I couldn't help but smile. Is it good? I asked. He nodded, a ghost of a smile appearing on his lips. Papa doesn't let me have sweets often. Well, I think after the adventure you've had today, you deserve it, I said, taking a sip of my own hot chocolate. So, Marco, what grade are you in? First grade, he replied, seeming to relax a little. I go to St. Bernadette's Academy. I raised my eyebrows. St. Bernadette's was one of the most exclusive private schools in the city. Wow, that's impressive. Do you like it there? It's okay. The other kids don't talk to me much. He looked down at his mug. I'm sorry to hear that. Sometimes it takes a while to make friends. He shrugged, a surprisingly adult gesture for such a small child. Papa says I don't need friends. I have family. Before I could respond to that concerning statement, the bell above the coffee shop door jingled, and a blast of cold air swept in. 2 men entered, both wearing dark suits despite the weather. The first was tall and broad-shouldered, with close-cropped dark hair and a scar that ran from his ear to his jawline. The second was slimmer, younger, with the same dark hair as Marco. Uncle Nico! Marco cried, jumping down from the booth and running to the younger man, who knelt and enveloped him in a tight hug. Marco, thank God, Nicholas Russo said, his voice thick with relief. He pulled back, holding the boy at arm's length, scanning him for injuries. Are you hurt? Did anyone touch you? I'm okay, Marco said. Miss Ellie found me and bought me hot chocolate. Nicholas Russo's eyes flicked up to meet mine, and I felt a chill that had nothing to do with my damp clothes. His gaze was calculating, assessing me as if I were a potential threat rather than someone who had helped a lost child. He stood, keeping one hand firmly on Marco's shoulder. Thank you for finding my nephew. Of course, I said, standing up. Anyone would have done the same. No, he said flatly. They wouldn't have. The larger man remained by the door, his hand inside his jacket, his eyes constantly scanning the coffee shop and the street outside. Only 3 other customers were in the shop, all of them suddenly very interested in their laptops or phones. We should go, Nicholas said to Marco. Your father is worried sick. At the mention of his father, Marco's face paled slightly. Is Papa angry? Nicholas's expression softened. Not at you, Piccolo. Never at you. The larger man by the door spoke quietly into what I now realized was a concealed earpiece. Area secure. Bringing the package out now. Package? I thought, bewildered. They were talking about a child like he was some sort of valuable cargo. Nicholas pulled a thick envelope from his jacket and placed it on the table. For your trouble. I stared at the envelope, then back at him. That's not necessary, really. Take it, he insisted, his tone making it clear this wasn't a suggestion. My brother will want to thank you personally. Give me your phone. Excuse me? Your phone, he repeated, extending his hand. I need your contact information. Reluctantly, I handed him my ancient smartphone. He typed something into it, then handed it back. You'll be hearing from us. Marco tugged at his uncle's sleeve. Can Miss Ellie come with us? She's nice, and she's all wet from the rain. Nicholas looked at me again, this time more thoroughly, taking in my soaked uniform, my worn jacket, the dark circles under my eyes that no amount of concealer could hide. I suddenly felt self-conscious under his scrutiny. "Another time, perhaps," he said to Marco, though his eyes remained fixed on me. "Miss Ellie probably has somewhere to be." "Actually," I began, not sure why I was even arguing. "I was just heading home. My shift ended." "Then we won't keep you." Nicholas cut me off. He turned to Marco. "Say thank you to Miss Ellie." Marco stepped forward, his small face serious. "Thank you for finding me, Miss Ellie. And for the hot chocolate." "You're welcome, Marco," I said, smiling at him. "Take care of yourself." Nicholas nodded once in my direction, then guided Marco toward the door, the larger man moving ahead of them to check the street before they exited. Just before they left, Marco turned and waved at me. I waved back, watching through the rain-streaked window as they climbed into a sleek black SUV with tinted windows. Another identical vehicle pulled up behind the first, and they drove away in tandem. "Friends of yours?" Maggie asked, coming over to collect the mugs. "Hardly," I said, still staring at the envelope on the table. "Just a lost kid and his very intense uncle. You gonna open that?" She nodded at the envelope. I hesitated, then picked it up. It was heavier than I expected. I peeked inside and almost dropped it when I saw the contents, a thick stack of $100 bills. "Jesus Christ," I whispered, quickly closing the envelope. "What is it?" Maggie asked, leaning closer. "Money," I said, my voice barely audible. "A lot of it." "How much?" I didn't know, and I wasn't about to count it in the middle of the coffee shop. Too much. Way too much for just helping a kid find his family. "What are you going to do with it?" I tucked the envelope into my bag, my mind racing. "I don't know. Give it back, I guess, if they contact me." The memory of Nicholas Russo's cold, assessing eyes flashed through my mind. Something told me I would be hearing from them again, whether I wanted to or not. "You should go home and get dry," Maggie said, patting my shoulder. "You're shivering." I nodded, gathering my things. As I stepped back out into the rain, I realized my umbrella was still in the booth. I went back to retrieve it, and that's when I noticed Marco had left his dinosaur backpack behind. "Damn," I muttered, picking it up. It was surprisingly heavy for a child's bag. "Want me to call them?" Maggie offered. "No," I said quickly, remembering Nicholas's warning not to call anyone else. "I have the uncle's number. I'll contact them." I zipped up my jacket, clutching both the backpack and my umbrella, and stepped back into the rain. The entire 6-block walk home, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Twice I turned around, certain I would find someone following me, but the rainy street behind me was empty each time. By the time I reached my 3rd-floor walk-up, I was drenched and exhausted. I locked the door behind me, sliding the chain into place before collapsing onto my worn sofa. I pulled out my phone, staring at the new contact Nicholas Russo had added, Dante Russo, with a phone number. Dante Russo. The name tugged at my memory again, stronger this time. Where had I heard it before? I set Marco's backpack on the coffee table and unzipped it, looking for any identification that might help me return it. Inside were a few school books, a water bottle, a small toy car, and a folded piece of paper. Curiosity got the better of me, and I opened the paper. It was a child's drawing of 3 figures, a small boy holding hands with a tall man in a dark suit and a woman with yellow hair and a big smile. Across the top, in wobbly 1st-grade handwriting, were the words, "My family." I stared at the drawing, a lump forming in my throat. The woman looked nothing like me. I had brown hair, not blonde, but something about the hopeful imagination of a child who'd lost his mother made my heart ache. As I refolded the drawing and tucked it back into the backpack, my phone buzzed with a text message from the number Nicholas had entered. "Miss Morgan, I understand you have my son's backpack. A car will come for you tomorrow at 7 p.m. Dante Russo." "No, please. No, thank you. Just a command." I typed back, "I can drop it off somewhere, if that's more convenient." 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again before the reply came through. 7 p.m. Be ready. I set the phone down, my hands suddenly trembling. Why was I so unsettled? They were just people who wanted their child's backpack returned, wealthy people judging by their clothes and cars, but people nonetheless. Then it hit me. Why the name Dante Russo had sounded familiar. 6 months ago, there had been a shooting outside a restaurant in the North End. 3 men killed, reportedly members of an organized crime family. The newspaper had mentioned a rival boss, someone the police suspected but could never touch. Dante Russo, the most feared mafia boss in Boston. And I had just helped his son. Sleep eluded me that night. I tossed and turned, my mind replaying the events at the coffee shop, trying to convince myself I was overreacting. Maybe it was a different Dante Russo. Maybe the newspaper reports had been sensationalized. Maybe I had nothing to worry about. But the envelope of cash sitting on my kitchen counter suggested otherwise. In the morning light, I'd finally gathered the courage to count it. $10,000 in crisp $100 bills. Who gives a stranger that kind of money just for helping a lost child? Someone who doesn't want the police involved, whispered a voice in my head. I called in sick to work, something I never did, even when I actually was sick. My supervisor sounded surprised, but didn't question it. I spent the morning pacing my small apartment, alternating between staring at Marco's backpack and checking the time. 7 p.m. seemed both too far away and approaching too quickly. By noon, I'd made a decision. I would return the backpack and the money, explain that I wanted no part of whatever this was, and ask never to be contacted again. Simple. Clean. Safe. I changed my outfit 4 times before settling on a simple blue dress I usually saved for job interviews, paired with my only decent coat, a black wool pea coat I'd found at a thrift store 2 winters ago. I wanted to look respectable, but not like I was trying too hard. I pulled my brown hair into a neat bun, applied minimal makeup, and tried to calm the flutter of anxiety in my stomach. At 6:58 p.m., my phone buzzed with a text, outside. I grabbed Marco's backpack and the envelope of cash, took a deep breath, and headed downstairs. A black SUV identical to the one from yesterday idled at the curb, its engine a low purr in the quiet evening. The same large man from the coffee shop stood beside it, opening the rear door as I approached. "Miss Morgan," he said with a curt nod. "Hi," I replied, clutching the backpack tighter. "I have Marco's things." He didn't respond, just gestured for me to get into the vehicle. The interior was luxurious. Black leather seats, tinted windows, a partition separating us from the driver. The man climbed in after me, and we pulled away from the curb. "Where are we going?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Mr. Russo's residence," he replied, his eyes focused straight ahead. "I just want to return the backpack and the money," I said, holding them up. "There's no need to." "Mr. Russo insists on thanking you personally." His tone made it clear this wasn't open for discussion. I fell silent, watching through the darkened windows as we left my modest neighborhood behind and headed toward the affluent suburbs north of the city. The knot in my stomach tightened with every mile. After about 30 minutes, we turned onto a private road lined with old oak trees. At the end stood an imposing stone mansion, its windows glowing warmly against the twilight sky. A high wall surrounded the property, and I spotted surveillance cameras discreetly positioned along its perimeter. We pulled up to a wrought iron gate that opened automatically as we approached. 2 men in dark suits stood on either side of the entrance, their hands clasped in front of them, eyes scanning the vehicle as we passed. The driveway curved around a central fountain, before stopping at the main entrance of the house. "We're here," my escort announced unnecessarily, exiting the car and opening my door. I stepped out, my legs unsteady beneath me. The house was even more impressive up close. 3 stories of old-world elegance, with ivy climbing the stone walls and meticulously maintained gardens stretching in every direction. It looked like something from a period film, not a place where real people lived. The massive front door opened before we reached it, and Nicholas Russo emerged, his expression inscrutable. "Miss Morgan," he said with a slight nod. "Thank you for coming." As if I'd had a choice. "I brought Marco's backpack," I said, holding it out like a peace offering. "And the money. I can't accept it." Nicholas ignored the proffered items. "My brother is waiting. Please come inside." The interior of the house matched its exterior in grandeur. Marble floors, soaring ceilings, Antique furniture that probably cost more than everything I owned combined. Family photographs lined the walls, mostly of Marco at various ages, sometimes with Nicholas, sometimes with an older woman who I guessed might be a grandmother. But I didn't see anyone who looked like he could be Dante Russo. Nicholas led me through the foyer and down a hallway to a set of double doors. He knocked once, then opened them without waiting for a response. "She's here," he announced, stepping aside to let me enter. The room was a study, with bookshelves lining the walls and a massive oak desk positioned in front of floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the gardens. Standing at the window with his back to us was a man, his silhouette outlined against the fading daylight. "Leave us," he said, his voice deep and commanding. Nicholas hesitated for just a moment before nodding and closing the doors behind him, leaving me alone with Dante Russo. Slowly, he turned to face me. I don't know what I had expected. Some movie version Mafia boss, perhaps, aged and overweight with gaudy rings and a cigar, but the man before me was nothing like that. Dante Russo was tall and powerfully built, maybe in his late 30s, with dark hair that showed just a hint of silver at the temples. He wore a tailored charcoal suit that accentuated his broad shoulders and narrow waist. His face was all sharp angles, high cheekbones, strong jaw, straight nose that looked like it had been broken at least once. But it was his eyes that held me frozen in place, deep-set and intensely blue, almost startling against his olive skin. Those eyes studied me now with the same calculating assessment his brother had shown, but there was something else there too. A focus, a presence that seemed to fill the room and make the air between us crackle with tension. "Miss Morgan," he said finally, his voice softer now but no less commanding. "Please, sit." He gestured to one of the leather chairs positioned in front of the desk. I moved forward on autopilot, sinking into the chair and placing Marco's backpack on my lap like a shield. "I brought Marco's things," I said, my voice embarrassingly small in the large room. "And the money. I can't accept it." Dante walked around the desk and sat in the chair opposite mine, rather than behind the desk as I'd expected. It put us closer than I was comfortable with. No barrier between us. "Marco told me what happened," he said, ignoring my statement about the money, "how you found him in the rain and took care of him. He says you were kind." I swallowed hard. "Anyone would have done the same." "No," he said, echoing his brother's words from the coffee shop. "They wouldn't have. Most people would have walked past or called the police immediately." "I should have called the police," I admitted. "But Marco had his emergency card, so I thought it would be faster to call the number directly. And I'm grateful that you did." He leaned forward slightly. "Do you know who I am, Miss Morgan?" The directness of the question caught me off guard. I could lie, but something told me he would know. "I think so," I said, my mouth suddenly dry. "And yet you came here tonight. Did I have a choice?" A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "There are always choices. You could have thrown the backpack away, moved apartments, changed your phone number. You didn't. I hadn't even considered those options, which probably said something about my survival instincts, or lack thereof. I just wanted to return Marco's things," I insisted. "And the money. It's too much." "It's nothing," he dismissed with a wave of his hand. "A token of appreciation for helping your son, for doing so discreetly." His eyes held mine. No police, no questions. Just kindness to a child who needed it. I bit my lip, unsure how to respond. The whole situation felt surreal. Sitting in this palatial home, having a conversation with a man who, if the newspapers were to be believed, had ordered the deaths of countless people. "Marco's mother," I began hesitantly. "Is she dead?" he said flatly. 5 years now. Cancer. "I'm sorry," I said automatically. "As am I." He stood suddenly, walking to a cabinet in the corner and opening it to reveal a selection of bottles. "Would you like a drink?" "No, thank you." He poured himself what looked like whiskey, the amber liquid catching the light as he returned to his seat. "You work at St. Catherine's Hospital." It wasn't a question, but I nodded anyway. "In the cafeteria," he continued. 6 days a week, sometimes double shifts, You live alone in a third-floor walk-up in one of the worst neighborhoods in the city. Your parents died in a car accident when you were 19, forcing you to drop out of nursing school. You send money each month to your younger sister in Philadelphia, where she's studying to become a doctor. My blood ran cold. How do you... I make it my business to know everything about people who come into contact with my son, he said, taking a sip of his whiskey, even those with seemingly pure intentions. I stood up abruptly, clutching the backpack. I should go. Sit down, Ellie, he said softly, but there was steel beneath the softness. I sank back into the chair, my heart pounding. I'm not going to hurt you, he assured me, though it wasn't as comforting as he probably intended. Quite the opposite. What does that mean? He set his glass down on a small table beside him. My son likes you. He doesn't like many people, a trait he inherited from me, I'm afraid. This morning he asked if you could be his new nanny. I blinked in surprise. Nanny? His current caretaker is retiring next month, moving to Florida to be with her grandchildren. He studied me over steepled fingers. The position comes with a substantial salary, private accommodations here on the estate, and my personal guarantee of safety. You're offering me a job? I asked incredulously, as Marco's nanny? Yes. But you don't know anything about me. I know everything about you, he corrected. I know you're qualified. 2 years of nursing school before your parents' accident. I know you're responsible, working multiple jobs to put your sister through school. And most importantly, I know Marco trusts you, which is something I value above all else. My head was spinning. Mr. Russo, I appreciate the offer, but I can't just... Triple whatever you're making now, he interrupted. Plus room and board, health insurance, and a car at your disposal. Your sister's tuition will be paid in full, including her living expenses. The offer was so outlandish, so completely beyond anything I could have expected, that I almost laughed. Why? Why me? Because you helped my son when you didn't have to, he replied simply. And because I trust my instincts, I shook my head, trying to clear it. I need time to think. Of course. He reached into his jacket and produced a business card, which he handed to me. It was simple, elegant, with just his name and a phone number embossed in silver. Take a week. The offer stands until then. Before I could respond, the door opened and Marco burst in, already dressed in blue pajamas with spaceships on them. Papa, is Miss Ellie here? Zionico said... He stopped when he saw me, his small face lighting up. You came! I couldn't help but smile at his enthusiasm. Hi, Marco. I brought your backpack. Thank you. He ran over and took it from me, then looked up at his father. Can Miss Ellie stay for dinner, please? Dante placed a hand on his son's shoulder, his expression softening in a way I wouldn't have thought possible. Miss Ellie was just leaving, Piccolo. It's past your bedtime. Marco's face fell. But... No arguments, Dante said firmly. Say goodnight to Miss Ellie. Marco sighed dramatically, but did as he was told. Good night, Miss Ellie. Will you come back soon? I glanced at Dante, who watched our interaction with unreadable eyes. Maybe, I said carefully. If your papa invites me. He will, Marco said with the absolute confidence of a child. I'll make him. Dante chuckled, a warm, genuine sound that transformed his face. Go find Uncle Nico. I'll be up to read your story in 10 minutes. Marco nodded and scampered out of the room, taking his backpack with him. He's a wonderful boy, I said once he was gone. He's my world, Dante replied, and I believed him. Everything I do for him. The words hung in the air between us, loaded with implications I didn't want to contemplate. I should go, I said, standing again. This time he didn't stop me. Nicholas will drive you home. That's not necessary. It's late, and your neighborhood isn't safe after dark. His tone brooked no argument. The car will take you home. I nodded, knowing it was pointless to protest. As I turned to leave, he spoke again. The money, he said. Keep it. Regardless of your decision about the job. I looked back at him. This enigmatic, dangerous man who seemed to command the very air around him. Why are you being so generous to a stranger? His blue eyes held mine for a long moment. Because in my world, Ellie Morgan, loyalty and kindness are rare commodities. When I find them, I reward them. I didn't know how to respond to that, so I simply nodded and left the room. Nicholas was waiting in the hallway, as if he'd known exactly when our conversation would end. "Ready?" he asked. I nodded, following him back through the grand house. As we passed the living room, I glimpsed Marco sitting on a plush rug, showing his dinosaur backpack to an older woman who must have been the retiring nanny. He looked up and waved enthusiastically, and I waved back, feeling a strange tug in my chest. The drive back to my apartment was silent, giving me plenty of time to think about Dante Russo's offer. It was absurd, overwhelming, completely out of the blue, and yet my current life was a constant struggle, working endless shifts to make rent, sending whatever I could spare to my sister, falling into bed each night too exhausted to even dream of the future I'd once planned. Dante's offer would change everything, but at what cost? When we reached my building, Nicholas handed me a sealed envelope. "Your weekly schedule, should you accept the position," he explained, "and a contract outlining the terms." "Thank you," I said, taking it automatically. "Miss Morgan," he said as I moved to exit the car, "a word of advice." I paused, looking back at him. My brother is not a man accustomed to hearing no. His expression was solemn. "Whatever you decide, remember that." With that ominous warning hanging in the air, I got out of the car and watched as it pulled away, its taillights disappearing around the corner. I clutched the envelope in one hand and the business card in the other, feeling like I stood at a crossroads, with no idea which path led to safety and which to ruin. As I climbed the stairs to my apartment, my phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Thank you for returning Marco's backpack. He sleeps better with it. Consider my offer carefully, Doctor." I stared at the message, wondering how he'd gotten my number, then remembering that of course he would have it. He seemed to know everything else about me. The thought should have terrified me, but instead, I felt a strange flutter in my chest that I refused to examine too closely. That night, I dreamed of blue eyes watching me from the shadows, and a child's drawing of a family that included a woman with hair the color of sunshine. Morning came with no clarity. I'd spent hours reading over the contract Nicholas had given me, stunned by the details. A salary that made my current income look like pocket change, comprehensive benefits, a separate apartment on the Russo estate with my own entrance, and explicit provisions for my sister's education. Everything laid out in precise legal language, as legitimate as any employment contract I'd ever seen. Too good to be true. The phrase kept echoing in my mind as I moved through my daily routine in a daze. I called my sister, careful to keep my voice casual as I asked about her classes, her roommates, whether she needed anything. I didn't mention Dante Russo's offer. How could I explain something I couldn't understand myself? "You sound weird," she said, always too perceptive for her own good. "Is everything okay?" "Just tired," I lied. "Double shifts this week." "You work too hard, Elle. I can take out another loan." "Absolutely not," I interrupted. "I'm fine. Focus on your studies." After we hung up, I sat on my worn sofa, staring at Dante's business card. The silver embossing caught the light, winking at me like a dare. 4 days passed this way, working my shifts, coming home to my empty apartment, turning the card over and over in my hands, reading and rereading the contract. The deadline Dante had given me loomed larger with each passing day. On the 5th day, I was filling a coffee urn at work, when I overheard 2 doctors talking in hushed voices. "Russo's kid is in the ER," one said. "Fell off his bike or something." My hands froze on the coffee machine. "Jesus," the other doctor replied. "Is security notified?" "Triple presence. Admin's freaking out. You know what happened last time one of those family members was here?" I abandoned the coffee, yanking off my hairnet as I rushed toward the emergency room. I had no plan, no reason to insert myself into the situation, just a strange compulsion I couldn't ignore. The ER was in organized chaos, nurses and doctors moving efficiently between curtained areas. I spotted them immediately, Nicholas standing rigidly by a curtained bed, 2 men in suits flanking the area, their eyes constantly scanning. No sign of Dante. I approached cautiously, not sure if I'd be recognized or stopped by security. Nicholas saw me first, his eyebrows rising slightly. "Miss Morgan," he said, neither welcoming nor dismissive. "I heard Marco was hurt," I explained, suddenly feeling foolish. I wanted to see if he's okay. Something shifted in Nicholas's expression. Surprise, perhaps, or reassessment. He nodded once and pulled back the curtain. Marco sat on the edge of the bed, his small face tear-streaked but brave. His right arm was in a temporary splint, and a doctor was examining a scrape on his knee. "Miss Ellie," Marco's face lit up, momentarily forgetting his pain. "You work here?" "In the cafeteria," I said, moving to his side. "I heard you had an accident." "I fell off my bike," he said, looking down at his splinted arm. "Papa says I have to be more careful." "Where is your father?" I asked, glancing around. "Business meeting," Nicholas answered tersely. "He's on his way." The doctor finished examining Marco's knee and straightened up. "Just a green stick fracture," she assured Nicholas. "We'll get him in a proper cast, and he'll be good as new in about 6 weeks. Nicholas nodded. His phone constantly vibrating in his hand with incoming messages he quickly answered. "Can Miss Ellie stay with me?" Marco asked suddenly. "While they put on my cast?" Nicholas looked at me, then back at his nephew. "If she wants to." All eyes turned to me, and I found myself nodding. "Of course I'll stay." The relief on Marco's face made my heart twist. I sat beside him, carefully taking his uninjured hand in mine as the doctor explained the casting process. Nicholas stepped outside the curtain to take a call, his voice low and urgent. "Will it hurt?" Marco whispered to me. "No," I assured him, "and you get to pick what color you want." "Really?" His eyes widened. "Any color. Any color they have," I confirmed. "Green," he decided instantly. "Like a dinosaur." I smiled, squeezing his hand. "Excellent choice." The process of casting his arm went smoothly, Marco watching with fascination as the wet material was applied. I kept up a steady stream of conversation, asking about his favorite dinosaurs, his school, anything to keep his mind off the discomfort. Just as the cast was being finished, the curtain was abruptly pulled back. Dante Russo stood there, still in a business suit, his face tense with concern that melted into relief when he saw his son. "Papa!" Marco called, holding up his green cast proudly. "Look, like a dinosaur." Dante moved to his side in 2 long strides, kneeling to examine the cast and his son's face. "Are you in pain, Piccolo?" "Not anymore," Marco said. "Miss Ellie has been keeping me company. She works here." Dante's eyes finally shifted to me, and I felt that same electric jolt I'd experienced in his study. "Miss Morgan," he acknowledged, his deep voice neutral. "This is unexpected." "I heard Marco was hurt," I explained. I wanted to make sure he was okay. Something flashed in his eyes, appreciation, perhaps, or curiosity. "Thank you." The doctor returned with discharge instructions, addressing them to Dante with the deference of someone who recognizes authority. "Mr. Russo, Marco should be fine. The fracture is minor, and children heal quickly. He'll need to keep the cast dry, and we'll check it in 2 weeks." Dante nodded, his full attention on the doctor's instructions, asking precise questions about pain management and activity restrictions. I used the opportunity to slip away, squeezing Marco's hand one last time. "I have to get back to work," I whispered. "Feel better, okay? Will you come visit me?" he asked, his eyes hopeful. "You could sign my cast," I hesitated, glancing at Dante, who was still focused on the doctor. "We'll see." I made it halfway across the ER when I heard my name called. Turning, I saw Dante striding toward me, his presence causing medical staff to step out of his way instinctively. "You're leaving," he stated when he reached me. "I need to get back to work," I explained. "My break is over." He studied me for a moment, then pulled out his phone and typed something quickly. "Not anymore. I spoke to your supervisor. You have the rest of the day off." I blinked in surprise. "You can't just—" "I did," he interrupted. "Have dinner with us tonight. Marco would like it, and we need to discuss your decision about the position." It wasn't a request. I should have been annoyed at his presumption, but instead, I found myself nodding. "All right. The car will pick you up at 6. He turned to leave, then paused. "Thank you for staying with him." Before I could respond, He was gone, returning to his son's side with the single-minded focus I was beginning to recognize as his defining trait. The car arrived precisely at 6. This time, I was led through a different entrance to the mansion, into a warm kitchen where Marco sat at a large island, carefully coloring with his left hand. "Miss Ellie," he exclaimed when he saw me. "You came! Look at all the signatures on my cast." I examined the green plaster, already covered with names. Very impressive. "Papa signed it first," he said proudly, pointing to an elegant DR near his wrist. "You can sign it too. Use the gold marker. It's special." I took the offered marker and carefully wrote Ellie with a small heart beside it. Marco beamed. "Are you going to be my new nanny?" he asked suddenly. "Papa said you might be." I glanced around, but Dante was nowhere to be seen. "I'm still thinking about it. Please say yes," Marco pleaded. "Mrs. Abernathy is nice, but she's old and doesn't know about dinosaurs. You could help me with my homework and read me stories." The naked hope in his voice made my chest ache. Before I could respond, the kitchen door opened, and Dante entered, now dressed in dark jeans and a charcoal sweater that somehow made him look even more imposing than his business suit. "Marco, go wash up for dinner," he instructed. The boy slid off his stool, careful of his cast. "Don't let Miss Ellie leave, Papa." A ghost of a smile touched Dante's lips. "I won't." Once Marco had left, Dante turned to me. "Wine?" "Please." He poured 2 glasses of red wine from a bottle that probably cost more than my monthly rent, handing one to me. "Marco seems attached to you already." I took a sip, the rich flavor coating my tongue. "He's a sweet boy. He's persistent, like his father." Dante's blue eyes held mine. "Have you made a decision?" The directness of the question caught me off guard. "I'm still considering it. What's holding you back?" I set my glass down carefully. "Mr. Russo." "Dante," he corrected. "Dante," I acknowledged. "I think we both know this isn't just about being a nanny." His expression remained impassive. "Explain." I hesitated, searching for the right words. "The papers say you're dangerous, that you're involved in things that aren't exactly legal. And do you believe everything you read in the papers, Ellie? I believe you wouldn't offer a complete stranger a job paying 3 times the market rate without expecting something in return." A smile curved his lips, not reaching his eyes. Perceptive. "So what is it?" I pressed. "What do you really want from me?" He took a step closer, close enough that I could smell his cologne. Something expensive and subtle. Exactly what I said. Someone to care for my son, to be present in his life in a way I sometimes cannot be. "And that's it?" "That's it." He took another sip of his wine. "My world is complicated, Ellie. I won't pretend otherwise, but Marco's world doesn't have to be. He deserves normality, stability, someone who sees him for the child he is, not for who his father is." The raw honesty in his voice surprised me. "And you think I can provide that?" "I know you can." His certainty was unnerving. "I've watched you with him. You don't see the Russo heir. You see a little boy who likes dinosaurs and needs his backpack to sleep." I couldn't argue with that. When I looked at Marco, I saw a child desperate for connection, for someone to simply be present without agenda or fear. "If I say yes," I began cautiously, "I would need guarantees. Name them." "My safety, obviously, and my sister's." "Already covered in the contract," he said dismissively. "What else?" "Boundaries," I said firmly. "I won't be involved in anything illegal. My job is to care for Marco, nothing more." He nodded slowly. "Acceptable. Anything else?" "If I ever feel Marco is in danger, I leave, with no repercussions." Something flickered in his eyes. Respect, perhaps. Marco's safety is my primary concern as well. But understand this, Ellie. His voice dropped lower. Once you're part of our lives, certain protections extend to you, but certain risks do as well. I can mitigate those risks, but I cannot eliminate them entirely. It was the most honest statement he'd made, a clear acknowledgement of the world I would be stepping into. Before I could respond, Marco returned, his face freshly washed, his good arm clutching a dinosaur book. "Can we eat now? I'm starving." Dante's expression softened instantly. "Yes, Piccolo. Dinner is ready. Dinner was a surprisingly normal affair. We ate in a smaller dining room rather than the formal one I'd glimpsed on my first visit. Marco chattered about school, his friends, or lack thereof, and his extensive dinosaur knowledge. Dante listened attentively, asking questions that showed genuine interest in his son's passions. I watched their interaction, struck by the transformation in Dante when he focused on Marco. The hard edges softened, the calculating gaze warmed, and glimpses of genuine tenderness broke through his carefully maintained facade. "Miss Ellie," Marco said suddenly, jerking me from my observations, "will you read me a bedtime story tonight? Papa always does the voices wrong." "I do not," Dante protested mildly. "You make all the T-Rexes sound the same," Marco insisted. "Miss Ellie would do it better." Dante raised an eyebrow at me. "Apparently your dinosaur voice skills are being called upon." I couldn't help but smile. "I'd be happy to read to you, Marco, if your father doesn't mind." "Please, Papa." Marco turned pleading eyes to his father. Dante nodded, his expression unreadable. "Of course." After dinner, Marco led me upstairs to his bedroom, a spacious room decorated with dinosaur posters, bookshelves overflowing with children's books, and a large bed shaped like a triceratops. He carefully selected 3 books, arranging them in the order he wanted them read. "Papa always sits here," he said, patting the edge of his bed. I took the indicated spot, and Marco snuggled beside me, mindful of his cast. I began reading the first book, doing my best to give each dinosaur a distinctive voice. Marco giggled at my attempts, occasionally correcting my pronunciation of the more complex dinosaur names. Halfway through the second book, I glanced up to find Dante leaning against the doorframe, watching us with an expression I couldn't decipher, something between longing and satisfaction. Our eyes met briefly before he nodded and slipped away. By the third book, Marco's eyelids were drooping. I finished the story softly, closing the book as his breathing deepened into sleep. Carefully, I tucked the blanket around him and tiptoed from the room. Dante was waiting in the hallway. "He's asleep?" "Out like a light," I confirmed. "He normally fights bedtime with the determination of a seasoned negotiator," Dante said, the corner of his mouth lifting slightly. "You have a gift." "Just beginner's luck," I demurred. "Join me for a nightcap?" he offered, gesturing toward the stairs. I hesitated, glancing at my watch. It was already past 9. "1 drink," he added. "Then Nicholas will drive you home." I nodded, following him down to his study. The room felt different in the evening. Warmer, less intimidating, with soft lamps casting golden light across the bookshelves. He poured 2 glasses of amber liquid and handed one to me. "To new beginnings," he said, raising his glass slightly. I touched my glass to his, but didn't echo the toast, taking a small sip instead. The whiskey burned pleasantly down my throat. "You've made a decision," he stated, watching me over the rim of his glass. It wasn't a question, but I nodded anyway. "Yes." "And?" I took a deep breath. "I'll take the position, under the conditions we discussed." Something like triumph flashed in his eyes before his expression returned to its usual inscrutability. "When can you start?" "I need to give notice at the hospital. 2 weeks. He shook his head. 1 week. "I'll compensate the hospital for any inconvenience." I wanted to argue but knew it would be pointless. "Fine. 1 week. "Excellent." He moved to his desk, opening a drawer and retrieving a small box. "This is for you." I took it hesitantly. Inside was a sleek smartphone, much newer than my ancient model. "Secure communications," he explained. "All our numbers are programmed in. The security team can track it in case of emergency." The implications of needing such a device sent a chill down my spine, but I nodded, slipping it into my pocket. "There's something else you should know," Dante said, his voice taking on a more serious tone. "Marco's mother, Sophia." I tensed, unsure where this was going. "You said she died of cancer." "She did." He set his glass down, his expression hardening. "What I didn't tell you is that her family blames me for her death." "Why would they blame you for cancer?" "They believe the stress of being married to me exacerbated her condition, that I prevented her from seeking treatment abroad." His jaw tightened. "It's not true, but grief seldom follows logic." I waited, sensing there was more to this story. Sophia's family, the Calabreses, were once allies. Now they are... He paused, searching for the right word. Adversaries. They've made threats against Marco. My blood ran cold. Threats? Nothing they would act on, he said dismissively. They know the consequences would be severe, but it's why Marco's security is so extensive. Why he doesn't have many friends, why his previous nanny lived on the estate. And now you're telling me this because you need to understand what you're agreeing to. His blue eyes locked with mine. Marco's safety is paramount. Always. If you ever feel something is wrong, if you ever suspect someone is watching him or showing unusual interest, you contact me or Nicholas immediately. I nodded, the weight of responsibility settling heavily on my shoulders. I understand. Good. His expression softened slightly. Marco trusts you. I'm beginning to as well. The admission seemed to cost him something, as though trust was a currency he rarely spent. I won't let you down, I promised, surprising myself with how much I meant it. No, he agreed, studying me. I don't believe you will. The week passed in a blur of preparations. I gave notice at the hospital, packed my meager belongings, and said goodbye to the few friends I'd made in Boston. Nicholas arranged for movers to transport my things to the estate, though there wasn't much worth taking. I used part of the money Dante had given me, which I'd finally accepted after much internal debate, to buy new clothes more suitable for my new position. Nothing extravagant, but better quality than I'd been able to afford before. The night before I was to move to the estate, I called my sister. "You did what?" she exclaimed when I told her about the new job. "Ellie, this is crazy. You don't know these people. It's a good opportunity," I insisted. "The pay is amazing, and they're covering your tuition." "I don't need some stranger paying my tuition," she argued. "Something about this feels wrong. It's just a nanny position, Em, for a sweet little boy who needs someone stable in his life. And his father? What's he like?" I hesitated, unsure how to describe Dante Russo in a way that wouldn't alarm her further. "He's intense, but he loves his son." "Intense how? Is he single? Is he hitting on you?" "No, it's not like that," I protested, though I couldn't deny the strange tension that sometimes crackled between us. "It's strictly professional." She was silent for a moment. "Just be careful, Elle. If anything feels off, promise you'll leave." "I promise," I said, crossing my fingers childishly. Some promises were more complicated than others. The next day, Nicholas picked me up in the now familiar black SUV. My few suitcases were loaded into the trunk, and we set off for the Russo estate. I watched the city recede in the side mirror, feeling like I was closing one chapter of my life and opening another, far more unpredictable one. When we arrived, Mrs. Abernathy was waiting to show me around. She was a kind-faced older woman with steel-gray hair and knowing eyes. "You'll do fine, dear," she said, after giving me a tour of Marco's daily routine, his favorite foods, and the layout of the house. "The boy needs someone young, someone with energy. These old bones can't keep up with him anymore." "How long have you worked for the Russos?" I asked. 15 years, she replied. "I cared for Dante when he was just a boy after his mother passed. Then I stayed on, and when Marco came along," she smiled fondly. "He's a special child, much like his father was." What was Dante like as a child? I couldn't help asking. Her expression grew sad. Serious. Too serious for a boy his age. His father was a hard man, expected too much, too soon. She shook her head. "Dante is different with Marco, gentler. That's good." Before I could ask more questions, Marco burst into the room, his cast now completely covered in signatures and dinosaur drawings. "Miss Ellie, you're here to stay!" He threw his good arm around my waist. "I told Papa you would say yes." I hugged him back, surprised by the rush of affection I felt. "Yes, I'm staying. We're going to have a great time together. Can we go see your apartment? Papa had it all fixed up for you." Mrs. Abernathy chuckled. "Go on then. I've shown her everything she needs to know for now." Marco grabbed my hand, tugging me toward the back of the house. We exited through a rear door and followed a stone path that wound through immaculately landscaped gardens to a small cottage nestled among flowering trees. "This is all for me?" I asked. stunned by the charming exterior. "Papa said you needed your own space," Marco explained, pushing open the front door without knocking. The interior was even more surprising, tastefully decorated in soft blues and creams, with comfortable furniture, modern appliances, and fresh flowers on the dining table. It was larger than my old apartment, with a spacious living room, full kitchen, bedroom, and bathroom. "Do you like it?" Marco asked anxiously. "I helped pick the colors. It's beautiful," I said honestly. "You did a wonderful job." He beamed, then proceeded to give me a tour as if he'd designed the place himself. "And there's a button here," he said, pointing to a small panel by the door. "If you push it, security comes right away. Papa says it's important." The casual mention of security was a stark reminder of the world I'd just entered, a world where panic buttons were standard home features. After Marco's enthusiastic tour, we returned to the main house for dinner. Dante was absent, with Nicholas explaining he'd been called away on business, but would return the following day. I spent the evening helping Marco with his homework, supervising his bath, challenging with the cast, and reading more dinosaur stories until he fell asleep. The routine felt surprisingly natural, as if I'd been doing it for years rather than hours. Later, as I settled into my new cottage, the reality of my situation finally hit me. I'd left my old life behind to work for a man the newspapers called a criminal, caring for his son in a house protected by armed guards. I'd either made the worst decision of my life, or the best, and I had no idea which. My new phone buzzed with a text message. "Nicholas tells me you're settling in well. Marco is happy. Thank you. Doctor." I stared at the message, trying to decipher the man behind the initials. Dante Russo remained an enigma, dangerous yet protective, cold yet capable of surprising warmth where his son was concerned. What had I gotten myself into? Block 5. Days turned into weeks, and gradually, the Russo estate became home. My routine centered around Marco, waking him for school, helping with homework, accompanying him to appointments and activities. The little boy with the dinosaur backpack had firmly wedged himself into my heart, his resilience and enthusiasm infectious. Dante remained an elusive presence. He kept irregular hours, sometimes absent for days on business trips, other times working from his home office late into the night. When he was present, he devoted his full attention to Marco, helping with homework, teaching him to play chess, listening with genuine interest to his dinosaur facts. These glimpses of tender fatherhood contrasted sharply with the cold calculation I sometimes caught in his eyes when he received phone calls or when his associates visited. I learned to navigate the complex ecosystem of the Russo household. Nicholas, I discovered, was more than Dante's brother and right-hand man. He was Marco's fiercely protective uncle, who spoiled him with presents, but enforced discipline when needed. The security team maintained a constant, discreet presence, rotating shifts of serious men who nevertheless slipped Marco candies when they thought no one was looking. The household staff treated me with cautious respect, warming up only after it became clear I wasn't putting on airs about my position. And then there was Dante himself. Our interactions were mostly brief, professional updates about Marco's progress or needs, yet occasionally, I'd catch him watching me with an intensity that made my pulse quicken. Sometimes, he'd join Marco and me for dinner when his schedule allowed, and those evenings revealed glimpses of the man behind the formidable facade. His dry humor, his extensive knowledge of literature and history, his passionate opinions about everything from politics to pasta. One rainy Saturday, about a month after I'd moved in, Marco was at a supervised playdate with the son of one of Dante's associates, a rare social opportunity that had been thoroughly vetted by security. I was enjoying the quiet in my cottage, reading a novel, when a knock at my door startled me. Dante stood on my doorstep, raindrops glistening in his dark hair. He rarely visited my cottage, preferring to summon me to the main house when needed. "Is everything okay?" I asked immediately, my mind jumping to Marco. "Is Marco—" "He's fine," Dante assured me, stepping inside when I moved back. "Still at the Vescovi's. I just spoke with his security detail." I relaxed slightly. "Oh, good." He glanced around my living room, taking in the scattered books, the half-empty tea mug, the soft throw blanket rumpled on the couch. "You've made it your own. Is that okay?" A slight smile touched his lips. It's your home, Ellie. That's the point. He seemed different today, less guarded, more human somehow. He wore casual clothes, dark jeans and a gray sweater that softened his usually intimidating presence. Would you like some tea? I offered, unsure why he was here. I'd prefer coffee if you have it, I nodded, moving to the kitchen while he continued to survey my living space, pausing to examine the framed photo of my sister and me that sat on the bookshelf. Marco talks about you constantly, he said as I prepared the coffee. He's quite attached to you already. The feeling is mutual, I admitted, handing him a steaming mug. He's an amazing kid. Thanks to you, he's happier than I've seen him in years. Dante took a sip of coffee, his blue eyes meeting mine over the rim. You have a gift with him. It's easy to care about Marco. Not everyone finds it so. His expression darkened momentarily. His mother's family hasn't attempted to see him since the funeral. Their hatred for me apparently extends to my 6-year-old son. The bitterness in his voice was palpable. I'd learned bits and pieces about Sophia from Mrs. Abernathy before she left, that she'd been beautiful, gentle, from a powerful family that had once been aligned with the Russos. I'm sorry, I said softly. That must be hard for both of you, he shrugged, a gesture meant to appear casual but failing to mask the tension in his shoulders. Marco barely remembers her now. Sometimes I think that's mercy. And you? Do you still miss her? The question was too personal, crossing the careful boundaries we'd established. I regretted it immediately. Dante was quiet for a long moment, staring out the rain-streaked window. I miss what she represented, he finally said. Normalcy. The possibility of a life outside of... He gestured vaguely, encompassing the estate, the security, the world he'd built. Is that what you want? Normalcy. His eyes returned to mine, sharp and assessing. What I want is irrelevant. This is the life I've chosen, or perhaps the life that chose me. And Marco? Did he choose this life? No, Dante admitted, his voice softening. Which is why your presence is so important. You give him a connection to that other world, the normal one. I nodded, understanding my role more clearly now. I was a bridge between worlds for Marco, and perhaps, in some small way, for Dante too. I should go, he said abruptly, setting down his half-empty mug. I have calls to make before Marco returns. Of course. He moved toward the door but paused before opening it. There's a charity gala next weekend, for the Children's Hospital. I'm expected to attend, to make a donation. I waited, unsure where this was going. I'd like you to accompany me, he continued. With Marco. He'll be more comfortable with you there, and it would be beneficial for you to be seen as part of the family in public, part of the family. The phrase sent an unexpected warmth through me. I'd be happy to come. For Marco's sake. Good. He nodded once, decisive. Nicholas will arrange appropriate attire for you both. Before I could protest that I could dress myself, thank you very much. He was gone. The door closing softly behind him. The gala was held at the Ritz-Carlton. The ballroom transformed into a winter wonderland theme, despite it being barely autumn. Marco looked adorable in his first tuxedo, proudly showing off his cast, now decorated with dinosaur stickers, to anyone who would look. I felt self-conscious in the midnight blue gown Nicholas had sent over. A designer piece that fit as if it had been made for me, which it probably had been. You look beautiful, Dante murmured as he helped me from the car, his hand warm against the small of my back. He himself was devastating in a black tuxedo that accentuated his powerful build. Thank you, I managed, hyper-aware of his touch, of the curious glances from other arriving guests, of the photographers snapping pictures from behind velvet ropes. Inside, I quickly realized this wasn't just any charity event. The room was filled with Boston's elite, old money families, politicians, celebrities, and, I suspected, others in Dante's line of work disguised as legitimate businessmen. The way certain groups acknowledged Dante, with cautious nods or overly effusive greetings, spoke volumes about the power dynamics at play. Mr. Russo, a silver-haired man approached us, hand extended. So good to see you. And young Marco. My, you've grown. Senator Williams. Dante greeted him with a firm handshake. May I introduce Ellie Morgan, Marco's nanny and a valuable member of our household. The senator's eyes flicked over me, a flash of assessment quickly masked by practiced charm. Lovely to meet you, Miss Morgan. As the evening progressed, this scene repeated itself numerous times. Dante introducing me to various power players, always with the same phrasing, a valuable member of our household. Each time, I noted the reactions, ranging from polite disinterest to careful recalculation. Why do you introduce me that way? I asked quietly during a lull, while Marco was distracted by a chocolate fountain. Dante's eyes scanned the room continuously, ever vigilant. Because in my world, Ellie, who belongs to whom matters. By publicly claiming you as part of my household, I'm extending protection to you. Protection from what? His gaze finally settled on me, serious and intense. From anyone who might think you could be used to get to me, or worse, to Marco. A chill ran down my spine, despite the warmth of the crowded room. Before I could respond, Marco returned, chocolate smeared on his cheek despite his best efforts. Papa, can Miss Ellie dance with me? There's an orchestra. Dante smiled, the genuine one reserved only for his son. If Miss Ellie would like to dance, of course. Marco turned pleading eyes to me, and I laughed, taking his uninjured hand. I'd be honored. I led him to the dance floor, where he stood on my feet as I guided us in a simple box step. His face was alight with joy, a normal little boy having fun at a party. Looking down at him, I felt a fierce protectiveness surge through me. Whatever dangers lurked in Dante Russo's world, I would shield Marco from them with everything I had. Over Marco's head, I caught Dante watching us, his expression unreadable. When our eyes met, he raised his champagne glass slightly in acknowledgement, a gesture that felt strangely intimate amid the crowd. Later, after Marco had fallen asleep in a private room arranged by the hotel staff, Dante and I stood on a terrace overlooking the city lights. The autumn air was crisp, but I barely noticed the cold. You were wonderful with him tonight, Dante said, his voice low. With everyone. I felt like an imposter, I admitted. All these people with their wealth and power, and me in a borrowed dress. Not borrowed, he corrected. It's yours, and you belong there more than most of them. Trust me. I turned to face him, struck by the rare compliment. Thank you for inviting me. I think Marco had fun. Yes, he agreed, his eyes reflecting the city lights. But that wasn't the only reason I wanted you here. Something in his tone made my heart beat faster. Oh? I wanted to see you like this, he said softly. Away from the estate, away from your role as Marco's caretaker. Just you. The intensity of his gaze made it hard to breathe. And what do you see? He stepped closer, close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from him. I see a woman of extraordinary compassion and strength, who chose to enter my world despite knowing its dangers, who loves my son as if he were her own. Dante, I whispered. Unsure what I wanted to say, I've kept my distance, he continued, because I promised myself I wouldn't complicate your position in our household. Marco needs you too much. Is that the only reason? His hand came up to brush a strand of hair from my face, the touch feather-light. No. I also know that I'm not an easy man to care for. My life is... He paused, searching for words. Complicated. Dangerous. Not what someone like you deserves. Shouldn't that be my decision? The words slipped out before I could stop them. Something flared in his eyes. Hope, perhaps, or desire. Be very sure, Ellie. Once you cross this line, there's no going back. Not in my world. I knew he was right. Whatever was happening between us would change everything. The rational part of my brain screamed caution, reminded me of newspaper headlines about Dante Russo, of hushed conversations that stopped when I entered rooms, of armed guards and panic buttons. But there was another part of me, the part that had watched him read bedtime stories to Marco, that had seen the pain in his eyes when he spoke of his son's future, that had felt the careful restraint in his every interaction with me. That part wasn't afraid. I know who you are, I said quietly. I've seen enough to understand the world you live in. I'm still here. For a long moment, he simply looked at me, as if memorizing my face. Then, with deliberate slowness, he leaned down and pressed his lips to mine. The kiss was gentle at first, a question more than a demand, but when I responded, sliding my hands up to his shoulders, it deepened, becoming something urgent and overwhelming. His arms encircled me, pulling me against him as if he'd been wanting to do so for months. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against mine. "You should know," he said, his voice rough, "that I don't do anything halfway. If you're mine, Ellie, you're mine completely." The possessiveness in his tone should have alarmed me. Instead, it sent a shiver of anticipation down my spine. "And you?" I challenged. "Does it work both ways?" A smile, genuine, unguarded, transformed his face. For the first time since Sophia died, I think it might. As we stood there, the city spread out below us like a carpet of stars. I knew I'd made my choice. I had entered Dante Russo's world for Marco's sake, but I would stay for my own, whatever dangers that entailed, whatever complications arose. I would face them. Because somewhere along the way, this strange, dangerous man and his dinosaur-loving son had become my family. And family, as Dante Russo would say, is everything.